Okay, in this video for the lantern project, we're going to talk about working on this handle here and trying to recreate it and then make it believable to fit with our lantern project. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a path, just a single path right down the center of that handle, and then we're going to stroke it about 3 times to simulate the roundness or like a tubular handle. So what I want you to do is I want you to hit P for pen tool, and we're going to zoom in. We're going to need to be able to see where we're drawing our path. And for this, we're just going to click in the center, and for simplistic reasons, I'm just going to click straight line segments, and then we'll come back and edit it. For most of you, that's probably going to be the easiest. As you get a little more comfortable with the pen tool, then you can click and drag as you go to create those curves and stuff. Alright, so holding down Command when working with the pen tool allows me to select these individual points and move them if I need to. Letting go of Command gives me back to my pen tool, and then if I hover right over a line segment, it's going to give me the pen tool plus sign, allowing me to add a point. I'm going to hold down Command and just move it a little bit. And I'm just going to go through here and just figure out where I need to have curves. I'm going to pull that back. I'm going to click, that gives me a curve point, and then I'll just pull it into position. And I'm trying just to stay right down the center of that handle. I'm going to go ahead and delete this point up here because I want to do that a little differently. So if we hover over a point, you'll see that the pen tool changes to a minus, which means we can just click and get rid of that point. Holding down Command. Allows me to move those points, and I think I'm going to come up here and delete this one. Okay. Now if I hold down Option and hover over one of these points, that allows me to convert it from a sharp corner point to a round. So if I click and drag, now you'll see I have these handles, and that gives me more of a rounded anchor point right there. I'll delete that, and I can kind of pull that up and kind of give me the shape that I need. Okay, that's pretty good up there. And now I'll come down here. So if you can see between these 2 points, it's a straight line. No big deal. We'll come over here, and as we hover over that line, it gives us our point, allows us to add a point. I'm going to hold down Command, and I'm going to pull that right into the center. And then I'll just adjust my handles as I need to. Okay. And I'll just go around and adjust until I get it exactly the way I want it. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. too happy with the way this looks up here. I'm going to pull this over a little and then create a new curve point here. Flattens off here a little bit, so I'll pull this handle down, move this point up a little bit. So we're just fine-tuning. Alright, I think that's got it. Now, what do we do when we have a new path? We need to come over here and rename it. So I'm going to double click on it, and I'll call this my right handle. Alright, so now we have the path. Now we're going to stroke that path with a brush. So I'm going to come over here, and we're going to create a new layer, and anytime I create a new layer, I'm going to hold down the Option key. It allows me to name it, and I'll call this Stroke 1. I'm going to Option click the new layer icon, and I'll call this Stroke 2. Say OK, and 1/3 stroke, 3, and then we might even want to highlight stroke, so I'll call this my highlight. Alright, so now we have the layers. We just need to make sure we're on the right layer. And I'm going to go ahead and move this layers out of the way. You just need to make sure you're on the right layer when you're working with this. And we'll choose a brush, because now we need to choose a brush size that we're going to stroke this with. So I'll hit B on my keyboard, and we'll zoom in here so I can kind of see the size of the brush. Control Option allows me to scale my brush. And then I'm just going to hold down Option and sample some of this dark color. Right there, I'll sample. And I might as well make that a swatch in my swatch panel. So I'll just come up here and click. And we could name this, I could call this the handle 1. Alright, so there's my brush. I'm on the right layer. So I'll come down to that path, and I'll right click and I'll say Stroke Path. And I don't want to simulate pressure. I want this to be all one continuous size. So I'll hit OK. And there's my stroke. Pretty good. Could be a little larger, maybe, if we want the actual. So we'll just go Command Z. I'll change the size of my brush from 26 pixels about to 30 pixels. And then we'll come down here, right click and say Stroke Path, and see what that looks like. That's better. Okay, that's pretty good. Now what I want to do is I want to create a little brighter color, a brighter shade of that color. So I'll come over here, and I'm going to we'll just click up here in this gray area. I'll add that to my swatches. I'll call this handle 2. And then I'm going to click on here and just click up in a little lighter gray. Add to swatches. We'll call this handle 3. And then I'm going to come up here to the very top and get me some white. Add to swatches, and I'll call this handle highlight. cancel. Alright, so now I want to stroke it again, a second time, a third time, and a highlight time. So I'm going to come over here, click on my stroke layer number 2. I'm going to grab that second color, and this time I'm going to hold down Control Option. And since I have 30 pixel brush, I'm going to pull down to about how about an 18 pixel brush, and we'll see what that looks like. Just remember to be on a second layer so we can adjust these if we need to. I'll right click down here on my stroke path. We'll say stroke. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to click on my stroke 3 layer. Change my brush size one more time. Down to about 10. I'm going to choose my brighter gray of color, and we'll stroke the path again. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'll click right up on my highlight layer. Gonna change my brush again, Control Option, 10. How about if we go down to 5 pixels, 4 or 5 pixels. Choose my bright white color. Actually, I'm just going to choose white, and I'll right click down on my stroke path, click stroke path, and now I've got a white. I'm going to hit Command Z. That was a little large for me, so I'm going to change my brush size down to just a little, how about 3 pixels. Make sure we're on the highlight layer. We will stroke path with white, and there, that looks pretty good. And there we have our new handle. Cleaner, has a little more sparkle to it. It's a clean path. So what happens if if this doesn't look exactly right, or it needs to be blurred a little bit, a little hard edge on your transitions? We can just come back in here, and we'll keep that bottom gray area like it is. We'll just click on stroke 2, and I'm going to go up here under filter, and I'll just blur that a little bit just to soften it. Put a little Gaussian blur on that gray color. Not 48 pixels, but how about 3 pixels? We'll just type in 3. We'll say OK, and we'll just try that on all of them. So I'm going to click on stroke 3, and a quick way to apply filter again with the same settings is just to hit Command F. It'll apply that Gaussian blur. That might have been a little bit much. So we will go ahead and choose filter. We'll say blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll just take this down. And all I'm doing right now is just clicking my up and down arrow key, and that will change those values and allow us to kind of see how they're changing. I'll say OK, so I'm at 1.9 on that one, and we want to blur that highlight, so we'll go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. It applies it, and we'll just use our arrow keys because maybe we don't want that to be as okay. We'll say OK. And that's how we're going to create a handle.